The local moneylender is lying in a mass grave outside the city walls, denied a Christian burial, because he made the amateur mistake of charging interest too openly. That's the problem with freelancers. They think God is their banker, when in reality he's their most unforgiving auditor. In 15th century Florence, the church is absolute. Interest is a mortal sin that leads straight to hell. But we've learned that hell is just a poorly managed operating cost. We don't break the rule, we rebrand it. We don't lend money. We exchange currencies with a creative commission. It's theological engineering. If the contract is complex enough, even the Holy Spirit loses the paper trail in the lines of credit. How do you build the Medici financial empire when your primary shareholder threatens to excommunicate you for every transaction? The secret isn't defying God's wrath. It's making sure your contracts are written in a language even the devil himself couldn't audit. If you want to understand how modern finance was born from a stalemate between profit and purgatory, join the council by subscribing. Signal your position. The books might be opaque to the Vatican, but for us, they're perfectly balanced. You sit down at the counting table. The stone is cold through your shoes. The morning light comes in narrow through the windows and falls across the ledger already open in front of you. Iron gall ink, sharp and permanent. Your fingers are stained black at the tips from yesterday's copying work. The wool collar scratches against your neck when you lean forward. The ledger has two columns. The left records what happened. The right records what we say happened. Both are true. Neither is complete. Ronaldo Albizzi is already at his desk across the room. He's 53, grey at the temples, and he learned the triple contract structure from his father, who learned it from his, and who regards the entire theological debate with the patient detachment of a man whose family has been winning it for 3 generations. He doesn't look up when you enter. That's normal. Morning silence is part of the work. You open the ink bottle. The smell fills the small space between you and the page. Outside, the city is waking. Carts on cobblestones. Voices in the Mercato Vecchio. Somewhere nearby, the abacus beads are already clicking in the adjacent counting room. The sound is rhythmic, soothing even. The first contract of the day is already on your desk. A Florentine merchant, established reputation, solid trade in Flemish wool, wants 300 florins. He refuses to name the collateral. That's the problem, not the amount. Not the timeline, the thing he's hiding. You read the request twice, the second time doesn't make it clearer. Ronaldo. He looks up, waits. The Flemish wool trader. He's asking for 300 but won't specify the collateral. Did he specify the purpose? Expanding operations in Bruges. New warehouse space. Ronaldo sets down his quill. What did he offer instead of collateral? His reputation. His reputation. Ronaldo's face doesn't change. His reputation is that he expanded into Bruges once before and needed a loan to get out of the lease. What else? Partnership structure. Profit sharing on the Bruges revenue for 18 months. That's not collateral. That's him making his problem our problem. He picks up the quill again. Tell him we'll structure it as a cambium contract. Currency exchange with a commission for market risk. Florence to Bruges. Settled in Flemish groats. Reconverted at prevailing rate upon maturity. The spread covers our return. He gets his 300. We get our interest without calling it interest. Everyone goes home clean. You write that down. The cambium contract is the 1321 equivalent of renaming your problems until they stop sounding like problems. You're not lending money at interest, an arrangement that would get you excommunicated and buried in a ditch with the other amateurs. You're exchanging currencies in 2 cities, with different market rates. And if the difference between the florin to groat rate today, and the florin to groat rate in 18 months, happens to work out to exactly the return a loan would have produced, well, that's just how foreign exchange works. The Franciscans have opinions about this. The Dominicans have published treatises. Your family has 3 generations of clean ledgers and no outstanding theological complaints. The wool merchant will accept or he won't. If he doesn't, someone else will. Florence has 6 major banking houses and 42 minor ones. Competition is the other constant. You copy the terms into the draft contract. Your handwriting is smaller than Ronaldo's. Neater. You were taught by the same writing master, who trains the notaries at Santa Maria Novella, and the skill shows. Every letter is legible. Every clause is structured so that the grammar supports the argument. A contract is a logical proof written in commercial Latin. If the syntax breaks, the defense breaks. The door opens, no knock. Seratavio, the cloth guild master. He's breathing hard, walked fast. That's unusual. Seratavio does not walk fast. Ronaldo. I need a word. Ronaldo gestures to the chair. Seratavio sits. You stay at your desk. You're junior. You don't leave unless asked. The Cardinal's agent was at the guild hall this morning, Seratavio says. Routine inspection. Asked to see the financing documents for the last wool shipment to Avignon. Did you show him? I showed him the partnership agreement. 3 parties. Shared investment, shared risk, profit distribution on delivery. And? He asked where the principal came from. You stop writing. That's the question that matters. The partnership agreement is clean. The money that funded the partnership is not. What did you say? Ronaldo asks. I said it came from the guild treasury. Accumulated dues over 18 months. Did he ask to see the treasury records? He did. Did you show him? I did. Seratavio's voice is flat, tired. The numbers match, the dates match. He thanked me for my time and left. Ronaldo nods once. Then the matter is closed. The matter is not closed. Seratavio leans forward. He knows. He didn't say it. But he knows the treasury was funded by a discretionary gift from this house, 6 months before the wool shipment. He knows the gift was structured to arrive at exactly the moment the guild needed it. He knows the profit distribution on the wool shipment comes back to you at a rate that matches what a loan would have produced. He knows all of it. He just can't prove the connection. Then the matter is closed, Ronaldo says again. Seratavio stands. I have decided, as a personal spiritual matter, not to examine the theology of our arrangement too closely. But if the Cardinal's agent decides otherwise, I will not be able to protect you. I'm not asking you to. Seratavio leaves. The door closes. The silence that follows is the same silence as before, but heavier. You return to the draft contract. The quill scratches. The ink dries. Outside, the bells of Santa Maria Novella ring the hour. You've been at the counting table for 90 minutes. The cold in the stone floor has worked its way into your feet. You shift your weight. The discomfort stays. Ronaldo speaks without looking up. The Cardinal's agent will be back. I know. When he comes back, the numbers will still match. The dates will still match. The structure will still be clean. I know. Good. He dips his quill. Finish the Flemish contract. We'll send it this afternoon. You finish the Flemish contract. Every clause in order. Every term defensible. The work is detailed, endless, and strangely soothing in its precision. Your attention narrows to the width of a sentence, to the difference between a partnership and a loan, to the specific words that make sin disappear. The morning light shifts. The ink bottle is half empty. Your fingers are stained darker now. Outside, Florence continues. Every significant transaction in it passes through rooms like this one. The economy functions. The theology remains intact. You do not think about the moneylender in the mass grave. You think about the contract in front of you, and the one after that, and the steady rhythm of a trade that has no name for what it actually is. The work continues. It always continues. By midday, you've drafted 4 contracts and reviewed 6 others. The counting table is covered in parchment. Some of it is clean. Some of it has corrections in Ronaldo's hand, tight and precise, marking the places where your logic slipped or your Latin failed to support the structure. You make the corrections without comment. This is how you learn. The abacus beads click in the next room, copper coins being stacked. The sound is constant, rhythmic like a heartbeat for money. You've learned to work through it. Some days you barely hear it. Today, it's louder. That might be the room. That might be your attention. Marco, the Bolognese apprentice, enters with a stack of account books. He's 22, university trained in scholastic philosophy, and discovering that his education in the logical structure of theological argument is the most practically useful skill he owns. He sets the books on the side table and waits. The discretionary gift to the Weavers Guild, you say, did it clear? It cleared. Delivered yesterday evening. Recorded this morning. How much? 200 florins. The guildmaster signed the receipt himself. You make a note in the ledger. The left column. 200 florins transferred to the Weavers Guild as a discretionary gift. No repayment terms, no interest, no obligation. The right column. The same 200 florins, described as a contribution to the Guild's operational treasury, in support of Florentine textile trade. Both columns are true, neither is complete. Marco lingers. That means he has a question. Ask, you say. The Weavers Guild needed the money for a wool purchase. Immediate need. They'll turn a profit in 6 months when the cloth sells in Venice. The profit comes back to us as a partnership distribution. Correct. So we gave them money, they'll give us more money back. That's a loan. No, you say, it's a gift, followed by a separate unrelated partnership in a separate unrelated wool venture. The 2 transactions are not connected. They're connected by the calendar. The gift arrives exactly when they need it. The partnership profit arrives exactly when we expect repayment. The calendar is not evidence. The calendar is time. Time passes. Events occur. Correlation is not causation. You look up at him. Do you understand the difference? I understand the argument. Do you believe the argument? Marco hesitates. I believe the argument is defensible. Then it's sufficient. You return to the ledger. The Dominicans can argue causation all they want. We'll argue independence of events. As long as the documents support our position, the documents win. Marco nods. He's learning. Slowly, but he's learning. The door opens again. This time it's not Ser Ottavio, it's Fra Benedetto. Fra Benedetto is a Franciscan friar who arrived at the counting house 3 years ago, with a message from the prior at Santa Maria Novella, and has never quite left. He doesn't work here. He doesn't have a desk. But he's present often enough that Ronaldo stopped asking why. He carries knowledge he didn't intend to acquire. He watches to see if it will be used against him. He's holding a small leather satchel. He sets it on the table. Ronaldo, he says quietly, a moment. Ronaldo looks up. Waits. The prior has asked me to deliver this. Fra Benedetto opens the satchel and removes a single parchment, sealed. It's a request, not a demand. Ronaldo breaks the seal and reads. His face doesn't change. He sets the parchment down. The monastery needs funds for the new chapel construction, Ronaldo says. 2,000 florins, to be structured as a donation with no expectation of repayment. That's correct. And in exchange? No exchange. A donation. Ronaldo's voice is flat. Brother Benedetto, I've known you for 3 years. You've sat in this room while we've structured 40 transactions that would make a canonist weep. You know how this works. What does the prior want? Fra Benedetto exhales slowly. Prayers? For your family, in perpetuity. Prayers. Specific prayers. Named in the chapel dedication. Your family's names spoken aloud at every Mass celebrated in that space. Forever. Ronaldo nods once. And if I decline, then the prior will understand. And the request will not be repeated. But the prior administers the sacraments to half the banking families in Florence. He hears confessions. He grants absolutions. He has arrived at a pastoral position on usury that emphasizes intention over mechanics. That position is not doctrine, it's discretion. Discretion can change. The room is very quiet. The abacus beads have stopped clicking in the next room. Someone is listening. Ronaldo picks up his quill. I'll draft the donation agreement this afternoon. 2,000 florins. No repayment terms. The chapel dedication will include my family's names in perpetuity. Thank you. Fra Benedetto's voice is soft, relieved. The prior will be grateful. I'm sure he will. Fra Benedetto leaves. The door closes. Marco is staring at you. You ignore him. Ronaldo dips his quill and begins writing. You return to your own work. The parchment crackles under your hand. The ink scratches. Outside the bells ring again. The city continues. The donation to Santa Maria Novella is not a bribe. It's not protection money. It's not insurance against theological scrutiny. It's a gift. Freely given. Unconnected to any other transaction. The fact that it purchases prayers, and the prayers purchase discretion, and the discretion allows the banking house to continue operating without pastoral interference. That's just how gifts work. You give, someone receives, gratitude follows, gratitude has consequences. The Franciscans have opinions about this too. Fra Benedetto probably has opinions about his own role in it, but he delivers the messages anyway, and he sits in this room anyway, and he watches the ledgers fill with transactions that separate a single economic reality into three legally distinct fictions, none of which contain sin. All of which together produce exactly what a sin would have produced. You finish the entry, the left column, 2,000 florins donated to Santa Maria Novella for chapel construction, no expectation of repayment. The right column, the same 2,000 florins, described as a charitable contribution in support of the Church's sacred mission. Both columns are true. Neither mentions the prayers. The prayers are not a transaction, they're a grace. Grace cannot be purchased, grace can only be received. The theology is perfect, the arithmetic is perfect, the gap between them is where you live. The afternoon is colder. The brazier in the corner of the counting room is lit now, but the heat doesn't reach your desk. You've learned to ignore it. Cold keeps you awake. Warmth makes you careless. The bill of exchange in front of you is more complex than usual. 3 cities. 4 parties, 2 currencies. The merchant who requested it wants to move 500 florins from Florence to Bruges, settle the amount in Flemish groats, then reconvert the sum to Venetian ducats 6 months later, when the wool sells, and transfer the proceeds back to Florence. At each stage, the exchange rate will shift. At each stage, a commission will be charged for the service of conversion. The total return, after all commissions and rate fluctuations, will be exactly what a 6-month loan at 12% interest would have produced. But it's not a loan, it's 4 separate currency exchanges happening in sequence. The commission is not interest. It's payment for the risk of holding foreign currency in a volatile market. The fact that the market is not actually volatile, and the rates are effectively locked by prior agreement between the banking houses in each city, and the risk being compensated is entirely fictional. None of that appears in the contract. You write carefully. Every clause must be defensible. Every term must stand alone. The door opens. No knock. You don't look up. If it's urgent, they'll say so. Ronaldo. It's Ser Ottavio again. Twice in one day is unusual. Twice in one day means something broke. Ronaldo sets down his quill. What happened? A Dominican friar was at the Guildhall an hour ago. Not the cardinal's agent, someone else, younger. He was asking questions. What kind of questions? Friendly questions, casual questions, questions about how the guild finances its operations, questions about where the money comes from when the guild needs it quickly, questions about whether we've had good relationships with the banking houses in Florence. You stop writing. Friendly questions are worse than hostile ones. Hostile questions mean someone has already decided you're guilty. Friendly questions mean they're still building the case. Did he ask about specific transactions? Ronaldo asks. No, he asked about general practices. How often we borrow, how often we partner, how we decide which banking house to work with. What did you tell him? I told him the truth. We work with several houses. We choose based on terms and reputation. We structure our finances according to our needs and the advice of our notaries. Did he ask to see documents? He did not. Did he ask to return? Ser Ottavio hesitates. He said he was writing a treatise on the moral dimensions of commerce. He said he might return with further questions if I was willing to help him understand the practical realities of guild finance. And you said? I said I would be happy to help the church understand our work. Ronaldo nods slowly. You were correct to say that. Refusal would have been noted. I know. Ser Ottavio's voice is tight. But if he returns with a notary, or with someone from the bishop's office, then you'll show him the same documents you showed the cardinal's agent. The partnership agreements, the guild treasury records, the donation receipts, everything is in order. Everything has been in order for 3 generations. Everything is in order because we've made it in order. Ser Ottavio leans forward. Ronaldo, I've known you since we were boys. I trust you. But if the Dominicans decide to examine the connections between the transactions instead of the transactions themselves, the structure will not hold. The structure has held for 70 years. The structure has held because no one with authority has decided to dismantle it. That can change. Ronaldo picks up his quill. If it changes, we'll adapt. We always adapt. Ser Ottavio stands. He looks tired, older than he did this morning. I hope you're right. He leaves. The door closes. Marco is watching you again. You meet his eyes. Do you have a question? You ask. The friar, Marco says carefully. If he's writing a treatise on moral commerce, he's probably studied under someone. Probably someone at Bologna. Probably someone who's already published on usury and contract theory. Probably. So he already knows the answers to the questions he's asking. Correct. So why is he asking them? You set down your quill. Because knowing the answers and proving the answers are different things. He knows how the system works. He needs witnesses. Documents. Testimony from guildmasters who'll say, under oath, that the banking houses provide funds when needed, and receive returns when the ventures succeed. Once he has that testimony, he can connect it to the theological argument he's already written. Then the treatise becomes evidence. Evidence becomes doctrine. Doctrine becomes law. Marco's face is pale. How long do we have? Until he finishes writing. Could be 6 months. Could be 6 years. Dominicans are thorough. And then? And then we'll structure the transactions differently. Different names. Different instruments. Same result. You return to the bill of exchange. The church has been fighting usury for 800 years. We've been practicing it for 790. The argument never ends. The work continues. Marco doesn't look reassured. That's fine. He's not supposed to be reassured. He's supposed to understand that the ground he's standing on is thinner than it looks. And the only thing keeping him above the pit is the quality of the contracts he writes. You've finished a bill of exchange. 4 cities. 4 separate transactions. Each one defensible. Together they form a loan that does not exist. The parchment crackles as you set it aside to dry. The ink is black, permanent. The smell is sharp in the small room. Outside the light is fading. The city is moving toward evening. The bells will ring again soon. Ronaldo is writing the donation agreement for Santa Maria Novella, 2,000 florins. No repayment terms. Your family's name spoken aloud in perpetuity at every mass in the new chapel. The prayers will rise. The discretion will continue. The banking house will endure. You dip your quill and begin the next contract. The work is endless. That's the point. As long as the work continues, the system continues. As long as the contracts are defensible, the ground holds. The brazier crackles. The warmth still doesn't reach your desk. Your fingers are stiff with cold and stained black with ink. The wool scratches against your neck. The stone floor is hard under your feet. You write the next clause, then the next. The rhythm is soothing, mechanical, almost meditative. Somewhere in the guild hall, a Dominican friar is writing a treatise. Somewhere in the cardinal's office, an agent is reviewing documents. Somewhere outside the city walls, a moneylender lies in a mass grave, denied burial because he charged interest too openly. You are not him. You will never be him. The difference is not what you do. The difference is how you write it down. The quill scratches, the ink dries, the ledger fills, Florence continues. The counting room at midday is warm enough to work without gloves. Marco has been at the ledger since dawn, copying contract references into the guild compliance register, a task that exists because the guildmaster asked for it 3 months ago, and has not asked about it since. You can hear the scratch of his quill from across the room. Steady, mechanical, the rhythm of someone who has learned that most questions answer themselves if you just keep working. Serotavio arrives without knocking. Guildmasters don't knock. They arrive, and the room adjusts. He's carrying a letter, sealed. The wax is still warm. Ronaldo, he says. Not a greeting. A statement of intent. Ronaldo looks up from his desk, sets down his quill with the same care he uses for everything. Serotavio. I need a contract drafted by Thursday. The usual structure. 300 florins, repayment in 6 months. Collateral. Serotavio pauses. Just long enough for you to notice. I'll provide that separately. Ronaldo doesn't move, doesn't nod, just watches. The silence stretches. Marco's quill has stopped. You understand, Ronaldo says quietly, that we cannot draft the contract without verifying the collateral first. The collateral is in order. I'm sure it is, but the church reviews our books every spring. They're very interested in the details. Serotavio sets the letter on the desk between them. Doesn't slide it forward, just places it there. Draft the contract. I'll bring the collateral Wednesday morning. He leaves. The door closes with the kind of precision that comes from controlled anger. Marco looks up. Should I? Keep working, Ronaldo says. You pick up the letter. Break the seal. Read. It's a letter of introduction, addressed to Cardinal Orsini's office in Avignon, signed by the Florentine ambassador. Worth, if it's genuine, more than the loan itself. A letter like this doesn't just open doors, it opens negotiations, trade routes, papal contracts. Ronaldo leans back in his chair. Well, you agree. The Florentine Cloth Guild financing system works like this. The guildmaster needs cash now to pay weavers and dyers. He cannot borrow it, because borrowing implies interest, and interest is forbidden. So instead, he sells you a bill of exchange, a promise to pay 300 florins in 6 months in Bruges, where his cloth will actually sell. You pay him 270 florins today. In 6 months, you collect 300 in Bruges. The 30 florins is not interest, it's exchange rate fluctuation. It's compensation for currency risk. It's a dozen other things, all of them documented, none of them technically a loan. The system works because everyone involved has agreed not to call it what it is. Sir Ottavio knows this, you know he knows, the entire guild knows. The entire banking district knows. Probably half the priests at Santa Maria Novella know. The system runs on a very specific kind of institutional silence, the kind where asking the wrong question out loud doesn't just end the conversation, it ends the relationship. But collateral is not a question. Collateral is a requirement, and refusing to provide it before the contract is drafted is irregular. Ronaldo picks up the letter, holds it to the light from the window, checking the watermark, the ink, the seal impression. It's real, he says. Yes. Which means Sir Ottavio is either being watched very carefully by someone who wants to know who he's working with, or he's about to do something that requires friends in Avignon. Marco has returned to copying. His quill moves faster now, transcribing without reading. The kind of focused work that happens when you've just learned something you wish you hadn't. Ronaldo sets the letter down, picks up a fresh sheet of parchment, begins drafting. We're writing the contract, you ask. We're preparing the structure. He brings the collateral. Wednesday we finalize it. He doesn't bring the collateral. We have a draft we never completed. Either way, we've been responsive to a guildmaster's request. You watch him work. The standard triple contract formation. One document for the principal, one for the theoretical exchange rate risk, one for the administrative fee. 3 separate contracts that, when read individually, involve no interest whatsoever. When read together, they describe a loan at 10% annual return. The gap between the documents is where Florence built an empire. Marco's quill stops again. Should someone tell Fra Benedetto? Ronaldo doesn't look up. Fra Benedetto will hear about it when he hears about it. And if the Cardinal's office asks questions? Then we will have very complete documentation showing that we followed every guild compliance procedure exactly as written. You make a note in the margin of your own ledger. Letter of introduction, Cardinal Orsini, verification required. The kind of note that means nothing to anyone who doesn't already know what it means. Outside, the bells of Santa Maria Novella mark the hour. 1 bell, then 2. The sound carries across the rooftops, through the narrow streets, into every counting room in the district. The brazier in the corner has gone cold. Nobody has moved to relight it. The afternoon light slants across the floor in geometry that will be gone by evening. Ronaldo's quill continues its steady scratch across parchment. The same sound as Marco's, but slower, more deliberate. The sound of building something that will either hold or collapse, and knowing exactly which one it will be before anyone else does. Wednesday morning arrives clean and cold. The kind of cold that makes the stone floors feel like they're pulling heat directly out through your boots. Sir Ottavio does not come at dawn, does not come at midday. Marco works through the morning, transcribing guild payment records into the compliance ledger. He's gotten faster at it. Fast enough that you've started giving him actual contract work. The basic bill of exchange structures that don't require senior review. By afternoon he's drafting his 3rd contract of the week. You're reviewing it when Fra Benedetto arrives. He doesn't knock either. Franciscans don't knock when they're visiting on unofficial business. They just appear, quiet as snow, and wait to be noticed. Fra Benedetto, Ronaldo says. Not surprised, never surprised. Ronaldo, I was passing, thought I might warm myself before walking back. A lie everyone agrees to believe. Fra Benedetto's route from Santa Maria Novella to anywhere does not pass through the banking district. But he's been arriving every Thursday at the same hour for 3 years, and if he wants to call it coincidence, the counting room will not contradict him. Marco stands. Offers his chair near the brazier. Fra Benedetto accepts with a small nod. Settles in. His hands are ink-stained. He's been copying something. Possibly scripture. Possibly account books. With Fra Benedetto the difference is mostly vocabulary. Busy week? Ronaldo asks. The usual. Confession. Correspondence. A dispute over a dowry contract that both parties insist involves no binding promises whatsoever, despite 12 witnesses and a notary's seal. Ronaldo almost smiles. Almost. Marriage is complicated. Marriage is simple. Property law is complicated. When you combine them, you get theology. Marco is listening now. You can see it in the way he stopped moving. His university training was all theology. Canon law. Scholastic disputation. The formal structure of logical argument. He arrived in Florence expecting to use none of it. He's been discovering otherwise. Fra Benedetto looks at the contract Marco was drafting, doesn't pick it up. Just reads it from the desk. Bill of exchange, Bruges, 6 months. Yes, Marco says. The exchange rate calculation. You're using the Bologna method? Marco blinks. Yes, the differential rate formula. We were taught it at university. Taught it as theology or as commerce? As logic. The professor used it to demonstrate the principle of proportional equivalence in Aristotelian ethics. Fra Benedetto nods slowly. And now you're using Aristotelian ethics to calculate currency fluctuation for a Florentine cloth merchant. Yes. Does that trouble you? The question hangs in the cold air. Ronaldo has stopped writing. You've stopped reviewing. The room is waiting. Marco chooses his words carefully. The mathematics are sound. That wasn't the question. No, Marco sets down his quill. It doesn't trouble me. The principle is consistent. Whether you're calculating the just price of grain or the fair compensation for currency risk, the logic is the same. Proportion, equivalence, balance. And if the balance tips, if the proportion becomes disproportionate, then it's usury, and we don't write those contracts. Fra Benedetto looks at him for a long moment, then looks at Ronaldo. You're training him well. He arrived trained. I'm just showing him where the theory applies. Theology is very practical in Florence, Fra Benedetto says, to no one in particular, to everyone in the room. The door opens. Ser Ottavio. Finally. He's carrying a wooden case, sealed, the kind of case used for documents that matter. He stops when he sees Fra Benedetto. Just for a heartbeat, then recovers. Ronaldo, I've brought the collateral documentation. Excellent, we can finalize this afternoon. Ser Ottavio glances at Fra Benedetto again. Fra Benedetto has returned his attention to the brazier, warming his hands. Quietly present, quietly listening. Perhaps, Ser Ottavio says carefully, we could review it in the back office. Of course. They leave. The door to the rear counting room closes. You can't hear voices, just the low murmur of negotiation happening in a space designed for it. Marco returns to his transcription work. Fra Benedetto remains by the fire. He's worried about you, Marco says quietly. Fra Benedetto doesn't look up. Ser Ottavio is worried about many things, most of them reasonable. Will you tell anyone what you hear here? I hear confession 3 times a week. I hear things in this counting room every Thursday. I've developed a very reliable system for distinguishing between the two. Which is, if you're kneeling in a confessional booth, I'm a priest. If you're sitting at a desk drafting contracts, I'm just a friar warming himself by your fire. Marco considers this, returns to writing. The quill scratches. The fire shifts. Outside, the city continues. Cartwheels on stone. Distant voices. The bells marking the hour. Fra Benedetto leaves before Ronaldo and Ser Ottavio return. Just stands, nods to you both, and walks out into the cold afternoon. His shadow passes the window. Then he's gone. When Ronaldo emerges, the contract is drafted, complete, signed. The collateral documentation is sealed in the case, stored in the strong room with the others. You don't ask what it was, you'll see it eventually. When the books are audited, when the church reviewers come, when someone asks the question that turns paperwork into evidence. Until then, it's just another Thursday. Just another contract. Just another letter filed away in a wooden case, waiting. The contract sits on your desk for 2 days before you understand what you're looking at. It's a standard partnership agreement. Salvatavio contributes 300 florins. The Albizzi house contributes expertise, access to trade routes, and administrative structure. Profit split 60-40. Term, 6 months. Renewal at mutual discretion. Except it's not a partnership agreement. It's the Cloth Guild loan, restructured. Every number identical. Every term exactly the same, just different words. Where the bill of exchange said exchange rate compensation, the partnership agreement says profit distribution. Where the bill said principal repayment, the partnership says return of contributed capital. The mathematics haven't changed. The language has. And the language is what the church reviews. You find Ronaldo in the back office, reviewing a completely different contract, property transfer. Nothing to do with Seratovio. The partnership structure, you say. He doesn't look up. Yes. It's the same money. It's the same numbers. Different instrument. If anyone compares them, they won't. Partnership agreements are filed with the guild. Bills of exchange are filed with the merchants' court. 2 different archives. 2 different jurisdictions. No one reviews both. You sit down. The wooden case with Sir Ottavio's collateral documentation is on the shelf behind Ronaldo's desk. Still sealed. Still untouched, since Wednesday. The letter of introduction, you say, that's not for the cloth trade. No. It's for something else. Something that needs papal approval. And he needs liquidity now, before the approval comes through. Ronaldo sets down his quill, finally looks at you, correct. And if the approval doesn't come, then he has a very expensive letter and a partnership agreement that converts to a standard term loan with penalty clauses. All documented, all legal, all compliant with every guild regulation and canonical restriction currently in force. You look at the partnership agreement again, flip to the 3rd page, there it is, buried in the administrative clauses. In the event of partnership dissolution prior to term completion, contributed capital shall be returned with compensatory damages calculated at standard commercial rates for premature contract termination. Compensatory damages, not interest, damages. The gap between those 2 words is wide enough to fit an entire banking system. Does Sir Ottavio know the structure can convert, you ask? He helped design it. And Fra Benedetto? Ronaldo picks up his quill again, returns to the property transfer contract. Fra Benedetto knows exactly what he needs to know, no more, no less. The room is quiet. Marco isn't here today. He's at the Guildhall, filing the partnership agreement. The task that exists so that someone other than the senior partners has touched the documents. Someone young. Someone trained in theology. Someone who can describe the logical structure of the contract to a church auditor without hesitation, because he genuinely believes the structure is sound. He's not wrong. The structure is sound. It's just flexible. Outside, a merchant you recognize passes the window, one of the Bardi family's junior agents. He glances toward the counting room, doesn't slow down, keeps walking. But you saw the glance, the quick assessment, calculating. Sir Ottavio met with the Bardi house last week, after he left your office. Before he brought the collateral documentation. He shopped the contract, you say. Of course he did. And they didn't take it. The Bardi house is more conservative than we are. They would have required collateral verification before drafting. Sir Ottavio couldn't provide that without revealing what the letter was for. So he came to us. He came to us because we understand that some questions are more expensive than the answers. You file the partnership agreement in the active contracts ledger. 6 months from now, it will either pay out as written, or it will convert to the penalty structure. or Ceratavia will renegotiate the entire thing into a third instrument that nobody has invented yet. Florence runs on this, the constant conversion of obligation into opportunity, debt into equity, equity into access, access into leverage. Every transaction a shell game, where the shell is language and the prize is money, that officially doesn't exist as money. The local moneylender, the one in the mass grave, he charged interest, called it interest, documented it as interest, died for the honesty. You call it partnership profit, risk compensation, administrative fees, penalty clauses. You'll die wealthy. The afternoon light is fading. The brazier needs wood. You stand to add it, but Ronaldo gestures you back to your desk. Leave it. Marco will relight it when he returns. You sit. Pick up the next contract in the review pile. A simple one. Grain shipment to Pisa. Straightforward bill of lading. No tricks. No conversions. Just grain moving from one city to another, and money moving the opposite direction. Sometimes a contract is just a contract. Not often, but sometimes. The bells of Santa Maria Novella ring for Vespers. The sound carries through the cold air sharp and clear. Fra Benedetto will be there. Leading prayers, hearing confession, administering the sacraments to families whose wealth was built on instruments exactly like the one you just filed. He knows. Of course he knows. Everyone knows. That's why it works. Marco drafts the Cloth Guild contract on his third attempt. The first two are correct but obvious. This one hides better. You watch him cross out a clause, rewrite it with narrower language, then pause with the quill suspended above the parchment. His hand doesn't move. His eyes don't leave the page. The pause lasts long enough that you notice it. Something wrong, you ask. He sets the quill down carefully, exactly parallel to the edge of the desk. No. You wait. The payment structure, he says finally. It tracks the harvest calendar, installments due after threshing, after market day, after the guild receives its portion. That's correct. So the guild pays us back with money it doesn't have yet. Also correct. Marco looks at the contract again. Which means we're advancing funds against future income. Yes. At a rate that exceeds the principal by 18%. You don't answer. He already knows the answer. That's interest, Marco says. Not a question. A statement of observed fact. Read the contract again, you tell him. Out loud this time. He picks it up, scans the first paragraph. In consideration of the Albizzi House's partnership in the productive enterprise of the Cloth Guild, and in recognition of shared risk in said enterprise, the Guild agrees to remit a proportional return calculated as... He stops. Keep going. Calculated as 18% of contributed capital, payable in 6 installments aligned with the natural rhythm of Guild revenues. He sets the contract down. It doesn't say loan anywhere. No. It doesn't say interest. No. But it is interest. You lean back in your chair. The leather creaks. What it is and what it says are two different things. The church cares about what it says. Marco looks at you with the expression of a man who has just watched someone walk through a wall, not disbelief. The wall is still there. He saw it happen anyway. That works, he asks. It's worked for 3 generations. He sits with that. Outside, the bells of Santa Maria Novella mark the hour. The sound rolls across the rooftops, through the shutters, into the counting room, where a young man from Bologna is learning that his university training in logical argument has a second application nobody mentioned in the lectures. The question you're not asking, you say, is why nobody objects. Marco picks up the quill again, doesn't write, just holds it. Because everyone needs it to work. The guild needs capital, we need returns. The church needs both of us to keep funding the hospital construction at Santo Spirito. You tap the contract in front of him. As long as the language is clean, everyone gets what they need, the system holds. And if someone looks closer, then the language has to be cleaner. You stand, walk to the window. The Mercato Vecchio is busy at this hour. Merchants, porters, money changers conducting the same conversion of sin into structure that you're teaching Marco to document in ink. That's the work, making it clean enough that nobody has to look closer. Marco sets the quill down again. This time he leaves it at an angle. Copy it fair, you tell him. Ser Ottavio collects it tomorrow. He nods, pulls a fresh sheet of parchment toward him. You watch him begin the first line in the careful script they taught him in Bologna, each letter formed with the precision of a man who understands that sloppy handwriting is a theological risk. The afternoon light shifts. The counting room warms slightly. Marco works in silence, converting his third draft into a final document that will sit in the Guild's records for the next 5 years. Never examined, never questioned, never called what it actually is. You return to your own desk, 6 contracts waiting for review. All of them structured the same way Marco's learning to structure his: legal in language, functional in practice, sustainable, as long as nobody says the word everyone's thinking. The abacus beads click softly as you verify the numbers on the first contract. Everything balances. The wool merchant's contract lands on your desk just after none. You recognize the handwriting Ronaldo's, which means he's already reviewed it and found something worth your attention. The discretion clause sits in the third paragraph, buried between 2 standard provisions about delivery schedules and quality guarantees. You read it twice to make sure you're seeing it correctly. It's not a discretion clause, it's a threat dressed as courtesy. In the event that questions arise regarding the theological propriety of this arrangement, you read aloud to the empty counting room. All parties agree to submit documentation for review by a mutually acceptable ecclesiastical authority, with costs of said review to be borne jointly. You set the contract down. Pick it up again. The language is perfect. The implications are poisonous. What it says: we'll share the cost of getting a priest to look at this. What it means: if you accuse me of usury, I'll drag you into the same examination, and we'll both explain our business practices to someone with the authority to excommunicate us. Mutually assured theological destruction. You're still staring at it when Ronaldo walks in, brushing rain off his cloak. January in Florence doesn't freeze, but it soaks. He hangs the cloak by the brazier without comment. You found it, he says. Who wrote this? Benetto's nephew, the one who studied law in Padua. Ronaldo pulls a chair close to the brazier, sits with the careful movement of a man whose joints hurt in wet weather. Smart boy, dangerous boy. This clause makes the contract unenforceable. This clause makes the contract untouchable. Ronaldo extends his hands toward the heat. Nobody's going to invoke it. That's the point. The moment someone calls for ecclesiastical review, they're admitting they need one. Every guild master in Florence will hear about it before Vespers. You read the clause again. It's leverage that works by never being used. A wooden sword that cuts because everyone agrees to pretend it's steel. We're accepting this, you ask. We're documenting it, Ronaldo says. Write a note for the file. Something neutral. Clause reviewed, language approved. Standard mutual assurance provision. He watches the flames. Then we never mention it again unless someone else does first. You pull a scrap of parchment toward you, write the note in 3 lines. Your handwriting looks exactly like what it is. A man recording something he doesn't want to remember. The next contract he writes will have 2 of these clauses, you say. Probably. And the one after that will have 3. Ronaldo doesn't answer immediately. He's watching the fire with the expression of a man calculating something he doesn't want to calculate. Then we'll write better ones, he says finally. That's how this works. Someone finds a new way to say the same thing, everyone else adapts. The language gets sharper. He looks at you. You think your father didn't deal with this? You think mine didn't? Every generation thinks they invented the problem. Every generation learns the same answer. The rain picks up outside. You can hear it against the shutters, steady and cold. File it under standard provisions, Ronaldo says. Market approved. When Benedetto's nephew starts teaching this trick to his apprentices, we'll already have the counter language ready. You file the contract in the wooden case marked with the current year. It sits between a bill of exchange for the Silk Guild and a partnership agreement for a shipment to Bruges. All of them legal. All of them functional. All of them dependent on nobody looking too carefully at the space between what they say and what they do. Ronaldo stands, joints cracking softly in the warmth. The Cardinal's agent is in Florence, he says, casual as commenting on the weather. Arrived yesterday, staying near Santa Croce. You look up. Do we know what he wants? Not yet. Ronaldo walks to the door, pauses with his hand on the frame. But Fra Benedetto was seen leaving the agent's lodging this morning, early, before Lord's. He leaves. The rain continues. You sit in the counting room with 6 contracts approved, 1 contract filed, and a new piece of information that changes nothing, and explains everything. Fra Benedetto doesn't visit before Lord's unless someone sent for him. You return to the next contract on your desk. The work doesn't stop, because the questions get sharper. The work stops when the answers run out. The afternoon count takes longer than it should. Not because the numbers are wrong, because you keep checking them twice. 473 florins in the strongbox, 6 contracts finalized, 11 pending review, 3 bills of exchange awaiting countersignature from banking houses in Bruges, Venice and Avignon. Everything accounted for, everything documented, everything structured so carefully that the gap between sin and trade requires a lawyer to find and a theologian to explain. You're finishing the 3rd verification when the door opens without a knock. Fra Benedetto stands in the doorway, wet from the rain, carrying a leather satchel that wasn't part of his possessions 3 days ago. He closes the door behind him with the quiet care of a man who doesn't want to be remembered entering. I need to speak with you, he says, not a request. You set the quill down. About? He doesn't answer immediately. He crosses to the brazier, sets the satchel on the floor beside it, and holds his hands to the heat. His fingers are pale. Not from cold, from gripping something too tightly for too long. I've been carrying messages, he says finally, for someone who cannot write them himself. You wait. Cardinal Orsini. Fra Benedetto doesn't look at you. He's still watching his own hands. He has a debt, substantial, complex, the kind that requires instruments I do not understand, and that he cannot acknowledge publicly. The strongbox sits locked on the table between you. 473 florins that suddenly feel insufficient for what's coming next. How substantial, you ask? Enough that restructuring it will require 3 banking houses working in coordination. Fra Benedetto finally looks at you. He's chosen the Albizzi house to hold the primary contract. You don't move. The numbers are already forming in your head. Not amounts, not yet, but structure. The architecture of hiding a cardinal's debt inside instruments, so layered that no single contract looks like usury, even though the entire arrangement functions as exactly that. Why you ask? Fra Benedetto's mouth tightens. Because I hear confessions from half the banking families in Florence. Because I administer sacraments to people whose fortunes depend on instruments I am not supposed to understand. He picks up the satchel, sets it on your desk with the weight of something both valuable and dangerous. Because I know how to carry documents without reading them. Usually. You don't touch the satchel. You read them. I read enough. His voice is flat. Enough to understand that what I've been carrying is either brilliant financial engineering or an ecclesiastical crime, depending entirely on who's asked to explain it. The rain outside has settled into a steady drum. You can hear it on the roof, in the courtyard, against the stone that holds this entire district together, through combinations of weight and implicit understanding. The cardinal needs an answer, Fra Benedetto says, not about whether it's permissible, about whether it's possible. You reach for the satchel. The leather is good quality, oiled against weather, marked with a seal you don't recognize, but whose meaning is obvious. Someone with resources and risk in equal measure. Inside, 4 documents, each written in a different hand, each describing a different financial instrument, each carefully structured to look independent, while functioning as parts of the same whole. A bill of exchange from Rome to Florence, a partnership share in a wool venture, a discretionary gift tied to calendar dates, a conversion of debt to equity through language so precise it takes you 3 readings to find the actual numbers. You set them on the desk in sequence. This is a triple contract, you say. I know. Hidden inside what looks like 4 separate arrangements. I know. You look at Fra Benedetto. He's watching you with the expression of a man who has carried something toxic and needs permission to set it down. This is what I do, you tell him. This is the work. He nods once, slowly, not agreement, acknowledgement. Can it be done? He asks. You look at the documents again. The numbers are large but manageable. The structure is complex but sound. The theological exposure is exactly what it always is. Absolute if anyone looks directly at it, and invisible if the language holds. Yes, you say. It can be done. Fra Benedetto exhales. The tension in his shoulders doesn't release. It shifts, becomes a different kind of weight. Then I'll tell the Cardinal's agent you'll draft the instruments. He moves toward the door, pauses. He'll want them completed by Candlemas, 6 weeks. That's fast. He's aware. Fra Benedetto opens the door. Rain and cold spill into the counting room. He's also aware that speed increases risk. He's prepared to compensate for that risk appropriately. He leaves before you can ask what appropriately means in a cardinal's vocabulary. The documents sit on your desk beside the afternoon count. 473 florins in the strongbox, 6 contracts finalized. A cardinal's debt waiting to be structured into instruments that will either hold or collapse, depending entirely on whether the language is clean enough that nobody has to look closer. You lock the strongbox, file the count sheet, leave the cardinal's documents on the desk where Rinaldo will find them when he returns. Outside, the rain continues. Florence continues. The work continues. The gap between theology and arithmetic remains exactly where it's always been, in the space between what you write and what it means, maintained by precision, protected by silence, sustained by the shared understanding that some questions are better left unasked. You blow out the candles one by one. The counting room goes dark. Ser Ottavo arrives at the counting house just after Terce, with a question he has been waiting 3 years to ask. You know this because he stands in the doorway longer than necessary, and because Rinaldo looks up from his ledger without surprise, and because the question, when it finally arrives, lands in the middle of the room like something that has been traveling a long distance. How much of this, Ser Ottavio says, is actually legal? The parchment in front of you is a partnership agreement for a wool shipment to Bruges. It is not a loan, it says so in 3 different clauses. The profit share is discretionary. The timeline is flexible. The principal repayment is structured as equity dissolution over 18 months, which makes it a commercial venture, not a debt instrument. You have written 4 of these this week. Rinaldo sets down his quill. All of it. I mean canonically. So do I. Seratavio crosses to the brazier. He does not warm his hands. He just stands there, looking at the coals. I attended Mass this morning. Fra Benedetto gave the homily. He spoke about Deuteronomy, the part about not charging your brother interest. He gives that homily twice a year, Rinaldo says. Always in January, always after the guild audit. He looked directly at me. He looks at everyone directly. It's why half the congregation confesses to him, and the other half avoids confession entirely. The abacus on Marco's desk clicks steadily in the corner. He is calculating compound interest on a bill of exchange, which is not called compound interest in the contract, because the contract calls it a foreign exchange risk premium, adjusted for calendar uncertainty. The calculation is identical, the language is not. You set down your quill. You are asking whether the structure we built for your guild financing is a sin. I am asking whether you believe it is. I believe, you say, that the structure complies with every written prohibition in canon law. I believe your guild has financed 8 months of operations without disruption. I believe the partnership agreement we drafted uses language that 3 bishops and a papal auditor have reviewed without objection. That is not what I asked. Rinaldo stands. He moves to the window. The shutters are open enough to let in cold air and the sound of the market below. You are asking the wrong question, Seratavio. The question is not whether God permits this arrangement. The question is whether the Church has decided to notice it. And if they decide to notice, then we redraft the language. We have done it before. Seratavio turns from the brazier. His face is the face of a man who has been carrying something heavy and has just realized he cannot set it down. My father ran the guild for 30 years without credit instruments. He paid cash for every shipment. He died solvent and in good standing with the Church. Your father, Rinaldo says, ran a guild 1/3 the size of yours. The wool trade has changed. Florence has changed. You can operate the way your father did, or you can compete with the guilds in Venice and Genoa, who have been using these instruments for 2 decades. Or I can lose my soul. The room goes quiet. Even Marco's abacus stops. You look at the partnership agreement in front of you. The ink is still wet on the discretionary profit clause. The clause that makes this transaction legal is 11 words long. The clause that makes it profitable is 9. The gap between them is 2 words: at maturity. Rinaldo does not move from the window. Fra Benedetto hears your confession, yes? He does. And he has never refused you absolution? No. Then you have your answer. Seratavio stays at the brazier for another moment. Then he nods once and leaves without signing anything. The door closes. The market sound fades. Marco picks up his abacus and continues calculating. Rinaldo returns to his desk. He will be back tomorrow, he says. He always comes back. You finish the partnership agreement. The language is perfect. The structure is sound. Seratavio will sign it, or someone else will, and the wool will ship to Bruges on schedule. The question he asked will not be answered. It will just stop being asked. By mid-afternoon, you have reviewed the same contract 3 times and still cannot find the flaw. The contract is a bill of exchange for a Venetian merchant who needs to move funds from Florence to Avignon without physically transporting gold. The mechanism is standard. He deposits florins here. His agent collects their equivalent in Avignon 3 months later, and the difference between the deposit and the withdrawal is structured as a currency conversion fee, not interest. The structure is clean. The language is precise. The conversion rate is within the acceptable range of market fluctuation. But something is wrong. Rinaldo leans over your shoulder. He does not ask what you are looking for. He just waits. The timeline, you say finally. 3 months, standard. For a route that takes 6 weeks. He is silent for a moment. Then he picks up the contract and holds it to the window light. The merchant is not moving money. He is hiding time. You see it now. The extra 6 weeks are not travel time, they are waiting time, time for a debt to come due somewhere else. Time for a transaction to clear that cannot clear while this money is visible in Florence. The bill of exchange is not moving his wealth. It is making his wealth temporarily invisible. Ronaldo sets the contract back on your desk. Do we care? Do we? The structure is legal. His deposit is real. His agent in Avignon is documented. If he chooses to use our instrument to obscure a separate arrangement, that is not our concern. Unless the separate arrangement is flagged by a guild audit, then the separate arrangement is flagged, not ours. You pick up your quill. The contract requires a countersignature from a Florentine notary, which means it will be recorded in the public register, which means it will be visible to anyone who knows how to read a ledger and what to look for in the gaps. The parchment beneath your hand is sheep, not calf. You can feel the difference in the grain, coarser, less forgiving of corrections. The notary will know what kind of document this is before he reads a single word, just from the weight of it. Contracts written on sheep parchment are the ones clients want filed quickly and reviewed slowly. You sign it. Marco is watching from his desk. He does not ask why you signed a contract you just spent an hour questioning. He has learned that some questions are more dangerous than their answers. The afternoon bells ring from Santa Maria Novella. The sound rolls through the counting house, through the stone walls, into the space where you sit with a contract that is either perfectly legal or perfectly incriminating, depending on who is reading it and why. Outside, a cart passes. The wheel needs grease. You can hear the axle grinding against the hub, metal on wood, the sound of something that will fail soon but has not failed yet. The driver does not stop. The cart continues toward the Ponte Vecchio, and you think about timelines and what they hide, and how many transactions in this city are timed to the rhythm of what cannot be seen. You file the contract in the wooden case with the others. Just another document. Just another transaction that will either hold or collapse, and you will know which one long before anyone else does. Ronaldo is already reviewing the next file. A land lease near Fiesole. 15-year term. Rent payable in grain, not coin, which makes it invisible to the tax assessor, but visible to anyone who knows that grain is how you move wealth when you do not want the movement recorded. The counting house smells like ink and beeswax and the faint metallic tang of the florins locked in the strongbox beneath Ronaldo's desk. You have learned to recognize that smell. It means the day's transactions are complete, and the ledgers are current, and the city outside will continue turning on agreements no one discusses, and instruments no one names. The wax seal is still warm when you close the case. Marco dips his quill. The scratch of it against parchment is the only sound now, that, and the bells, fading. You reach for the next contract. The letter arrives at Vespers, carried by a boy who does not give his name. Ronaldo opens it at his desk, reads it once, reads it again, then he looks at you with the expression of a man who has just been handed a problem that could be either routine or catastrophic, depending on a single detail he does not yet know. "We have a new client," he says. The letter is written in Latin. The handwriting is excellent. The signature is not a name. It is a seal you recognize from documents you have been trained not to discuss in public. A cardinal's seal. Not just any cardinal. One whose accounts have been moving through Florence for 3 years without official acknowledgement, structured through a network of agents and intermediaries so complex that tracing the actual source requires 6 different ledgers, and a working knowledge of who reports to whom in the papal household. You have never met him. You have signed 11 contracts on his behalf. He wants a triple contract, Ronaldo says. The triple contract is the most elegant legal fiction your family has ever built. It is not one contract. It is 3. Written separately, filed separately, each one perfectly legal in isolation, and all three combining to create a loan that does not exist on paper but functions in every practical sense. Contract 1. A partnership agreement with discretionary profit sharing. Contract 2. A separate insurance policy covering the partnership's commercial risk. Contract 3. A bill of exchange that moves funds at a specified date, structured as currency conversion. None of them mentions interest. All of them guarantee it. The Guild Review Board has examined this structure 4 times. They have never found grounds for objection, because there is nothing to object to. Each contract is clean. The Cardinal wants one for an amount that would finance a small army. You look at the letter. The request is clear. The timeline is aggressive. The delivery method, unsigned, carried by a boy who has already disappeared into the market crowd, suggests that the Cardinal's concern is not canonical compliance. His concern is visibility. 3 of your legal fictions are currently under Guild review, Ronaldo says quietly, as if reading your thought. Not ours. A banking house in Siena that got ambitious. If the review board decides those contracts constitute usury, the ruling applies to every similar structure in Tuscany. Including ours. Including ours. Marco has stopped working. He is listening without appearing to listen, which is a skill he has developed over 6 months of hearing conversations that are not meant for him. You pick up a blank sheet of parchment. The Cardinal's request is either brilliantly timed or catastrophically timed, and you will not know which until the Guild Review Board issues their ruling. But the request is here. The Cardinal is waiting. And the Albizzi family has been structuring these transactions for 3 generations without refusing a client who can pay. You begin drafting the first contract. Partnership agreement. Discretionary profit sharing. No fixed timeline for return of principal. The language writes itself. You have done this often enough that the clauses arrive in order, each one building on the last, each one technically independent. Each one part of a structure that will either hold forever or collapse the moment someone decides to look at all 3 contracts in the same room. Ronaldo watches you work. He does not offer corrections. He is waiting to see if you will ask the question Sir Ottavio asked this morning. You do not ask it. The first contract is finished by Compline. The second will be drafted tomorrow. The third the day after. By the end of the week the Cardinal will have his loan. It will not be called a loan, it will be called a commercial partnership with associated instruments. The arithmetic is clear, the danger is not. You set down your quill. The counting house is dark now except for the brazier and 2 candles. Ronaldo is still at his desk, reviewing a separate ledger. Marco has gone home. The letter with the Cardinal's seal sits on your desk, waiting to be filed. You do not file it yet. You just sit there, looking at it, thinking about the Guild review in Siena, and the 11 contracts you have already signed, and the connection between a Cardinal who needs discretion, and a merchant house that has built its reputation on providing exactly that. One document could destroy both men, or it could make them both indispensable. Then you file the letter in the wooden case with the others. Just another client. Just another structure that will either hold or collapse. You decide it will hold. Marco asks the question on his second day, reviewing triple contracts. How much of the discretionary gift is actually discretionary? You look up from the ledger you're balancing. Ronaldo doesn't look up at all. All of it, you say. And how much of it varies? None of it. Marco sets down his quill. He came from Bologna with a master's education in scholastic philosophy, and the belief that logic could solve anything. 3 weeks in the counting house have taught him that logic doesn't solve problems. It documents solutions other people already found. That seems, he says carefully, theologically problematic. It is, Ronaldo says without lifting his eyes from the parchment. Write it anyway. The brazier in the corner has gone cold. Nobody has bothered to light it. The stone floor pulls heat through your boots the way it always does in January. and the morning light through the shutters is the color of pewter. Marco looks at the contract in front of him. A cloth merchant in Pisa, 200 florins, repayment in 6 months, plus a discretionary gift calculated to exactly 4% of principal. And you can see him working through the problem the same way he would work through a disputed passage of Aquinas. The gift is voluntary, therefore it cannot be guaranteed. The gift is regular, therefore it cannot be voluntary. Both statements are true. The contract requires both to be true simultaneously. The discretion, you say, is in whether the merchant chooses to do business with us again. Marco writes that down. His hand is steady. That's good. The last apprentice Ronaldo took on couldn't hold a quill without his fingers cramping after the 4th contract. He lasted 2 weeks. And if he doesn't pay the gift, then we don't extend him credit next time. But the gift isn't required. Correct. So we're not punishing him for failing to pay interest. Also correct. We're just choosing not to do business with someone who doesn't voluntarily thank us for our services. Exactly. Marco looks at the contract again. You watch him arrive at the conclusion in real time. The moment where the logical structure clicks into place and he understands that his entire university training in theological argument is the most practically useful skill he owns. He picks up his quill. The church, he says quietly, is going to notice this eventually. Probably, Ronaldo says. The sound of the quill on parchment is the only answer Marco gets. You return to your own ledger. A bill of exchange from Avignon that needs countersigning before Vespers, and the counting house settles back into the rhythm it always has. 3 men working in silence. The scratch of quills. The occasional clink of the abacus beads when the numbers get complicated. Outside, the bells of Santa Maria Novella mark Tesse. The ink on Marco's contract is still wet when a messenger arrives from the Wool Guild. You recognize the boy, one of the Alberti household's runners, the kind who knows which doors to use and when not to knock. He hands you a folded note sealed with plain wax. No crest. That tells you more than the words inside. You break the seal. The message is 3 lines. Bernardo Corsini has secured a wool shipment from Burgundy, at terms you weren't offered. The factor who brokered it is someone you've worked with before. You fold the note and set it on the desk without comment. Ronaldo glances at it. He doesn't ask. Marco doesn't notice at all. He's already halfway through the next contract, his quill moving with the careful speed of someone who's begun to understand the pattern. The Corsini name shouldn't bother you. The factor's choice shouldn't bother you. But the fact that you learned about it from a guild runner instead of from the factor himself, that tells you the negotiation was concluded 2 days ago, maybe 3, and you weren't slow because you made a mistake. You were slow because you didn't know the opportunity existed until it was already gone. Marco finishes the contract just before midday. He hands it to you for review. The parchment is good quality, expensive, but not so expensive. It draws attention, and the clauses are exactly where they need to be. Principal, term, discretionary gift. 3 separate instruments that happen to reference each other without explicitly depending on each other. You initial it in the margin and pass it to Ronaldo. Clean work, Ronaldo says. He doesn't look at Marco when he says it. He's already reaching for the next contract in the stack. Marco allows himself the smallest visible relief. Not a smile, just a breath. That's when you know he'll last longer than 2 weeks. The Medici warehouse smells like raw wool, and the particular kind of damp that comes from stone walls built too close to the river. You're here because Giovanni sent word yesterday that he had something worth seeing, and when Giovanni de' Medici says something is worth seeing, you don't send a clerk. The wool is Burgundian, 20 bales, grade high enough that the Republic's inspectors didn't even bother to check the weight. Giovanni stands beside the nearest bale with his arms crossed, watching 2 of his men mark the inventory. He doesn't look at you when you approach. Corsini wanted it, he says. I heard. Offered the factor 8% over standard brokerage. You run the numbers without needing to think about it. 8% on a Burgundy shipment of this grade would have eaten most of Corsini's margin, unless he already had a buyer lined up in Pisa or Siena. Which means he did. Which means someone told him about the shipment before the factor made it common knowledge. How much over did you go, you ask? 12. The math is clean. Giovanni paid more than the wool is worth on a single transaction, but he bought the factor's loyalty for the next 5 shipments, and Corsini is now permanently half a step behind on Burgundy contracts. You can see the whole structure of it in the way Giovanni's men are handling the bales. Careful, expensive, willing to wait for the return. One of the workers drops a bale, not hard enough to damage it, but hard enough that Giovanni's head turns. The man freezes. Giovanni says nothing. The man picks up the bale and sets it on the stack with both hands this time, the kind of care you'd use with a crate of Venetian glass. Giovanni turns back to you. Rinaldo still training that Bologna boy? Marco, yes. Can he write a bill of exchange without checking the template every 3rd line? Not yet. Tell me when he can. The warehouse is cold in the way that large, empty spaces are always cold in February. Your breath mists when you speak. The river smell is stronger near the back wall where the stone is older, and the mortar has started to fail in places. You've been in this warehouse before, 3 years ago, when Giovanni's father was still alive, and the Medici name meant half what it means now. The bales were smaller then. The workers were fewer. Giovanni stood in a different place in the room, closer to the door, where sons stand when their fathers are still handling the negotiations. I need a notary I can trust, Giovanni says. Someone who knows how to write a contract that says one thing to a client and a different thing to a judge. Marco's not there yet. I know, that's why I'm telling you now, instead of asking you now. One of the workers calls out a count. Giovanni acknowledges it with a nod, but doesn't move from where he's standing. The wool is sorted by weight and grade, each bale tagged with a number that corresponds to a separate ledger entry. It's the kind of organization that costs time up front and saves money over years. Giovanni's father never bothered with it. Giovanni started the system the week after the funeral. Corsini's going to notice you outbid him, you say. He already has. And he'll do what he always does, complain to the guild, make noise about fair dealing, try to undercut me on the next Flanders contract. Will he succeed? Giovanni looks at you for the first time since you walked in. His expression doesn't change. What do you think? The answer is no. Corsini has money and connections and a family name that goes back 6 generations. But he doesn't have the thing Giovanni has, which is the ability to lose money on one contract in order to win the next 4. Corsini thinks in quarters. Giovanni thinks in decades. You've seen this pattern before in other men, but never in someone this young. The workers finish the count. Giovanni signs the ledger without reading it. He hands it to the man on his left, and turns back to the bales. You came here expecting me to offer you part of the shipment, he says. I considered it. I'm not going to. I know. But I am going to tell you that the Bruges factor who sold me this wool has a brother in London. And that brother has access to Cotswold fleece at prices the Venetians haven't discovered yet. And that I'm not interested in Cotswold fleece because my buyers are in the south, and they want Burgundy or they want nothing. You write none of this down. Giovanni wouldn't say it if he thought you needed to. The brother's name is in the ledger I just signed, Giovanni continues. You didn't see it, I didn't tell you. But if someone happened to send him a letter inquiring about bulk contracts for spring delivery, I expect he'd be interested in hearing terms. The wool smell is thicker now. One of the workers has opened a bale to check for moisture damage, and the raw lanolin scent cuts through the river damp like vinegar through oil. You spent 2 years working in a wool house before you ever touched a ledger. You know this smell the way you know the sound of your own breathing. Giovanni's men close the bale. The count resumes. You watch the numbers accumulate in your head without effort. 20 bales, 400 stone. Unit price that makes sense only if Giovanni is planning to hold half the shipment until summer, when the Pisan buyers start competing again. Ronaldo knows about this, you ask? Ronaldo knows I'm talking to you. He doesn't know what I'm saying. Why tell me? Because Corsini is going to spend the next 6 months trying to figure out how I beat him. And while he's doing that, he's not going to notice that you've locked up the London contracts. And by the time he does notice, you'll have enough margin built up that it won't matter what he offers. The bells of Santa Trinita mark none. The warehouse is darker than it was when you arrived. No one has bothered to light the lamps. Giovanni's men work by the grey light from the high windows, their shadows long and thin across the wool bales. You don't thank him. Giovanni doesn't want thanks. He wants you to owe him, which is different, and more valuable, and the kind of thing you can't write into a contract but which both of you will remember when the next opportunity splits 3 ways instead of 2. Tell Marco I'll need him in May, Giovanni says, if he's ready. And if he's not? Then I'll find someone else. You leave the warehouse the same way you came in. The door closes behind you with the sound of iron on stone, and the street outside is full of the afternoon crowd. Merchants, apprentices, 2 Dominican friars, arguing about something you can't hear. The air smells like bread and horse dung, and the river, which is the way Florence always smells in February, when the wind comes from the west. You turn toward the Ponte Vecchio and start walking. The contract arrives at your desk 3 days after the warehouse meeting. No messenger. No seal. Just a folded parchment left on top of your correspondence stack sometime between Lords and Prime, while you were still at the church, and Ronaldo was still at home, and Marco was still learning how to calculate exchange rates, without moving his lips while he counts. You unfold it. The terms are simple. A factor in London, the brother Giovanni mentioned, though his name is spelled differently here, and the family connection isn't listed anywhere in the document, is prepared to negotiate a standing contract for Cotswold fleece delivery. Spring and autumn shipments. Prices locked quarterly. Payment in Florentine florins or Venetian ducats. Factor's preference. Your risk on the exchange. The numbers are good. Not perfect. Good enough that you'll make margin even if the spring market softens. Good enough that you won't if the Venetians decide to undercut English wool with Spanish imports again. But that's a risk you can calculate and prepare for, instead of a risk that appears out of empty air the way Corsini's Burgundy shipment did. You read it twice. Then you read it a 3rd time looking for the part that isn't written down. The factor wants a guarantee. Not a payment guarantee. He's too experienced to ask for something that explicit, but a relationship guarantee. The kind where you send him business twice a year for 5 years, and he sends you prices before he sends them to anyone else, and at the end of 5 years you're both making enough money that neither of you remembers who initiated the arrangement. The unwritten piece is Giovanni. If you take this contract, the factor will assume you and Giovanni are working together, which you're not. But the assumption will spread the same way. Assumptions always spread in the Florentine wool trade, through dock workers and warehouse clerks, and the men who drink together after Compline, and forget that some information is worth more than the cost of the wine they're drinking. Corsini will hear it. He'll hear it within a week. Because Corsini pays his clerks well and treats them badly, which means they talk to your clerks and Ronaldo's clerks, and the clerks who work for the Alberti and the Strozzi, and everyone else who wants to know which families are moving together and which families are starting to split. And when Corsini hears it, he'll make his own assumptions. He'll assume the Medici are expanding west. he'll assume you're the instrument of that expansion. He'll assume that any contract you negotiate in the next 6 months has Giovanni's money and Giovanni's strategy behind it, even when it doesn't. Which means he'll overpay to compete with you, which means his margins will thin. Which means in 2 years, maybe 3, he'll have to choose between accepting lower returns or withdrawing from contracts he can't afford to win. You set the parchment down. Marco is copying a bill of exchange at the small desk Ronaldo set up for him near the window. His handwriting has improved. The letters are smaller now, more controlled, the kind of script that fits more words on a page without looking cramped. He's halfway through the 3rd paragraph when he notices you're watching him. "Something wrong?" he asks. "No." He goes back to writing. The scratch of his quill is steady. Ronaldo taught him to trim the nib every morning before he starts work, and it shows. The lines are clean, no blots, no places where the ink feathered, because the cut was uneven. You pick up your own quill, the ink is fresh. Ronaldo mixed it this morning with the oak gall powder you bought from the apothecary near San Lorenzo, the one who grinds it fine enough that it doesn't leave sediment at the bottom of the inkwell. You write 3 lines. The factor's name, the terms, your signature. Then you fold the parchment and seal it with the plain wax you use for correspondence that doesn't need to announce itself. No crest, no ribbon. Just a clean fold and a seal that will break the first time someone opens it, which tells the recipient that no one else has read what's inside. Marco finishes his copy. He sands it carefully and sets it aside to dry. Then he looks at you again. "The Corsini shipment," he says. "The one Ronaldo mentioned yesterday." "What about it?" "He paid too much for it." You wait. "The Burgundy market is soft right now," Marco continues. "The Pisson buyers aren't ordering until they see spring demand from Venice. Which means Corsini's holding expensive wool in a warehouse, while he waits for the price to recover. And if it doesn't recover by Easter, he'll have to sell at a loss or hold it into summer, which ties up capital he could be using for Flanders contracts." "Yes." "So why did he do it?" "Because he thought he was competing with me." Marco thinks about that. You can see him working through it the same way he works through the theological problems in the contracts, following the logic, looking for the place where the argument turns. "But you weren't bidding on that shipment," he says. "No." "So he paid too much for wool he didn't need because he thought you wanted it." "Correct." Marco picks up his quill. He doesn't write anything. He just holds it the way people hold things when they're thinking about something else. "That seems," he says slowly, "like the kind of mistake a man only makes once. Usually. But Corsini's made it before. 3 times in the last 2 years. The afternoon light is starting to fade. The shutters are open, and you can hear the street noise from below. A cart passing. Someone shouting about the price of olive oil. The bells of Santa Maria Novella marking Vespers. Ronaldo will be back soon. He's meeting with a notary about a property transfer in Prato, the kind of negotiation that takes all afternoon, because both sides know exactly what the property is worth, and neither side wants to be the first to say the number out loud. You stand. The sealed parchment is still on your desk. You pick it up and hand it to Marco. "Take this to the courier near the Mercato Nuovo. The one with the red sign. Tell him it goes to London on the next ship to Southampton. Tell him I'll pay the express rate." Marco takes the parchment. He doesn't ask what's in it. "And after that," he says. "After that, go home. You've done enough for today." He leaves. You hear his footsteps on the stairs. Then, the sound of the door closing below. The counting house is quiet now. Just you and the afternoon light, and the desk full of correspondence that still needs answers before tomorrow. You sit down and reach for the next letter in the stack. The scratch of the quill, The smell of ink, the weight of the parchment under your hand. The arrangement is made. Marco sets down his quill at Vespers. He has been working on the same triple contract for 3 hours. A papal loan disguised as a three-way exchange involving Florentine wool, Flemish coin and Roman delivery terms. The structure is perfect. The language is immaculate. He has checked it twice. Does this work? He asks. You look up from your own ledger. Define work. Does it actually avoid usury, or do we just say it does? Ronaldo doesn't stop writing. Those are the same question. They're not, though. You know Marco knows this. He arrived from Bologna with a university training in scholastic logic and a belief that distinctions matter. 6 months in this counting house have not changed his belief. They have only taught him when to voice it. You walk over to his desk. The contract is clean. 3 separate agreements. Each one technically legal, each one meaningless without the other 2. A loan of 500 florins disguised as a wool purchase, a currency exchange, and a delivery contract across 3 cities. The interest is baked into the exchange rate. The church cannot object to foreign trade. The mathematics are invisible unless you know where to look. It works, you say, because the only people who would bother to prove otherwise are the same people who need us to keep doing it. Marco looks at the parchment. And if they stop needing us? Then we stop working. He signs his name at the bottom. His hand is steady. That's how you know the question wasn't doubt. It was confirmation. He wanted to hear someone else say it out loud. The afternoon light is failing now. The brazier casts long shadows across the stone floor. Somewhere in the guild quarter the wool merchants are closing their shops. Somewhere in the papal accounting house, a cardinal's agent is reviewing contracts identical to this one. Somewhere in Avignon, a bishop is signing his name to a document whose structure he has decided not to examine. Fra Benedetto arrives just before Compline. He doesn't knock. He never does. He stands in the doorway, his Franciscan robes darker than the shadows behind him. The cardinal's contract, he says. It's been approved. Ronaldo sets down his quill. All 3 parts? All 3. The room is very quiet. You can hear the beads on Marco's abacus, though he isn't touching them. You can hear the wax seals cooling on the desk by the window. You can hear the sound of something that was built carefully over 6 months finally settling into place. Fra Benedetto steps inside. He closes the door behind him. I need to know one thing, he says. Ronaldo waits. If the review board audits these structures, if Rome decides to look closely at what we've been doing, will these contracts hold? That depends, Ronaldo says, on whether Rome wants them to. Fra Benedetto nods slowly. He already knew the answer. He came here to confirm he wasn't the only one who understood it. The cardinal's agent will arrive tomorrow, he says. He'll want the counter-signature before none. He'll have it. Fra Benedetto turns to leave. He pauses at the door. You should know, he says, that the Bishop of Fiesole has been asking questions. Not about your house specifically. About the structures themselves. Whether partnership agreements that require fixed returns are theologically distinct from loans. Ronaldo's face doesn't change. And he hasn't decided yet. Thank you. Fra Benedetto leaves. The door closes. The counting house is silent except for the fire and the distant bells. Marco is staring at his contract. What happens if the bishop decides they're not distinct? Then every banking house in Tuscany renegotiates its terms, Ronaldo says. Or stops lending to the church entirely. Which one? Ronaldo picks up his quill. Whichever one keeps us working. You return to your own desk. The ledger in front of you lists 47 contracts structured the same way. Partnership agreements that function as loans, exchange rates that conceal interest, delivery terms that exist only to justify the markup. Legal fictions, all of them. necessary fictions. The work continues because the institution cannot function without it. The moment that changes, the work stops. Until then, you draft contracts, Marco checks the logic, and Ronaldo signs his name with the calm certainty of a man whose family has been doing this for 3 generations. The candles burn lower. The shutters are closed against the January cold. Somewhere in this city, the Bishop of Fiesole is deciding whether to ask the question that everyone already knows the answer to. You reach for the next contract. The Cardinal's agent arrives at Terce, carrying a leather case and a list of terms that have already been agreed to. You recognize the type. A man who handles documents the way a soldier handles a weapon, with professional detachment and no visible emotion. Ronaldo spreads the contract across the counting table. 3 sheets of parchment, each one signed and sealed. A wool purchase agreement, a currency exchange. A delivery contract for goods that will never physically move from one city to another. The agent reads without speaking. His eyes move across the Latin in steady lines. He is checking for deviations, not errors. These contracts were drafted by a banking house that has been doing this longer than he has been alive. He signs his name at the bottom of each sheet. The ink is black and precise. No flourish, no hesitation. The Cardinal will expect the first return at Michaelmas, he says. Documented as a distribution of partnership profits, Ronaldo says. Of course. The agent folds the contracts and places them in his case. He does not offer his hand. He does not thank anyone. He leaves the same way he arrived, efficient, silent, already thinking about the next transaction. The door closes. Marco exhales slowly. You hadn't noticed he was holding his breath. That's it, he asks. That's it, you say. The contract is complete, the loan is made. The Church's prohibition on usury remains technically unbroken. The mathematics function exactly as intended. The only thing that has changed is the weight of the leather case the agent carried out the door. You sit at your desk and open the ledger. The Cardinal's account is listed under partnerships, not loans. The first payment is due in 8 months. The return is fixed at 12%, documented as a share of wool trade profits that exist only on parchment. The abacus beads click softly under your fingers. Addition, subtraction, the rhythm of verification. The numbers are correct because they were built to be correct. There is no risk in the structure, only in the question of whether anyone will bother to call it what it is. Ronaldo is already working on the next contract. A Sienese merchant guild requiring short-term credit for a shipment of dyed wool to Bruges. Same structure, same 3-part fiction. The details change, the architecture does not. You count the entries in the ledger, 47 contracts this year, 47 variations on the same legal avoidance. 47 times you have built a loan that is not technically a loan, signed by parties who understand exactly what it is, and have decided that understanding it is different from saying it. The afternoon passes in the steady accumulation of parchment and ink. Marco drafts, you review, Ronaldo signs. The brazier burns low and is refilled. The bells mark sext, then none, then vespers. At some point the repetition stops feeling like work and starts feeling like rhythm. Not the rhythm of discovery, the rhythm of maintenance. You are no longer inventing these structures, you are replicating them. The gap between innovation and routine is one you crossed months ago without noticing. The light through the shutters is amber now, slanting across stone that has been warming all day. Your hand moves across the parchment in practiced lines. The quill needs less pressure than it used to. The wax seals faster than you expect. The documents stack in neat piles by the window, waiting for the notary's final countersignature before they become official. Fra Benedetto does not return. The Bishop of Fiesole does not send a message. The question he was considering remains unanswered, which means it remains irrelevant. The work continues because no one has decided to stop it. By compline, you have reviewed 11 contracts and drafted 2 more. Your shoulders ache in the particular way that comes from sitting in the same position for 9 hours. The ache is familiar, comfortable, even. The body's recognition of a day that was spent doing exactly what it was built to do. Ronaldo closes his ledger. Tomorrow, he says, the Peruzzi house will send their quarterly review. They'll want to compare our partnership terms against theirs. And we'll show them the structures they already know we're using, and they'll confirm they're using the same ones, and everyone will continue. Marco is cleaning his quill. What happens when someone invents a better structure? Then we copy it, Ronaldo says, or they copy ours. It doesn't matter which. The counting house is dark, except for the last candle on Ronaldo's desk. The day is ending the way every day ends, with documents filed, numbers verified, and the quiet certainty that tomorrow will require the same work, written in slightly different terms. You blow out your own candle, the smell of hot wax and old parchment, the sound of shutters being latched, the weight of the quill in your hand lighter now than it was this morning. The work is finished. The work is never finished. You reach for your cloak. Outside, Florence is settling into night, the guild halls closing, the taverns filling, the churches ringing the hour. Somewhere in that city, contracts you drafted are being executed. Somewhere, a merchant is receiving credit he technically did not borrow. Somewhere, the system you helped build is functioning exactly as designed. The triple contract for the PayPal account is sealed and filed. The structure holds because it was built to hold. You walk toward the door, and the counting house fades into shadow behind you. The morning begins with verification. Ronaldo opens the ledger and calls out account names. You confirm the balances. Marco checks the calculations against the abacus. The process takes 2 hours and uncovers no errors. 47 contracts. 47 times the phrase partnership distribution appears where interest payment would be theologically unacceptable. 47 times the church's prohibition on usury bends around language carefully chosen to let it bend. You read the same clauses over and over. The structure is identical. Only the names change. Guildmasters, merchants, a cardinal's agent, a bishop's treasurer. The amounts vary. The percentages shift slightly to match market rates. But the architecture beneath it all is the same. In consideration of the risks undertaken in partnership, said distribution to be calculated as a share of profits from trade. Delivery terms to be established at the time of exchange. The words stop meaning anything specific after the 20th repetition. They become sounds. Rhythm. The legal fiction wears smooth with use, until you can draft an entire contract without thinking about what any of it actually means. Marco is faster now than he was 2 months ago. He doesn't pause before writing partnership where his university training taught him to write loan. The distinction has become procedural. Semantic. A technicality that everyone involved has agreed to treat as significant. By midday you have reviewed 6 more contracts and drafted 3. Your hand knows the phrases before your mind supplies them. The quill moves in practice lines across parchment that feels identical to yesterday's parchment, which felt identical to the day before. The counting house is warm now. The brazier has been burning since prime. The stone floor has absorbed enough heat that you no longer feel the cold rising through your boots. Comfort arrives slowly in rooms like this, not as a single moment, but as the accumulation of small warmths over hours. Ronaldo signs the last contract of the morning. He sets down his quill and flexes his fingers. The notary will come after none, he says. He'll need the Peruzzi documents countersigned before Vespers. You nod. The notary always comes after none, The Peruzzi house always needs documents countersigned before Vespers. The pattern repeats because the pattern works. The afternoon is quieter. No new contracts arrive. No agents appear at the door. You spend the hours reviewing accounts that have already been verified, checking calculations that have already been checked. The work expands to fill the time available for it. Marco is copying a contract for the Guild archives. His script is neat and even, the product of 6 months spent writing the same phrases in slightly different orders. He no longer asks whether the work matters. He has learned that mattering and functioning are different questions, and only the second one pays. The light through the shutters shifts from white to gold. The bells mark the hours with mechanical certainty. Somewhere in the city, the same bells are ringing for people whose work looks nothing like yours. Bakers, woolcarders, masons, dyers. All of them repeating the gestures that define their trade. All of them moving through the day in rhythms so familiar, they have stopped noticing them. You close the ledger, the accounts balance. They always balance, because the system was designed to balance. The mathematics are invisible, unless you know where to look, and the people who know where to look are the same people who benefit from not looking too closely. The notary arrives at none, carrying the Peruzzi documents. He spreads them across the table without speaking. You recognize the contracts, structures identical to yours, signed by different hands, serving the same function. He countersigns where Ronaldo indicates. The wax seals. The documents are official. He leaves. The door closes. The counting house returns to its particular silence, not empty but suspended, waiting for the next transaction, the next contract, the next repetition of work that has been repeated so many times it has worn grooves into the day itself. By Vespers the room is cooling, the brazier burns low, your shoulders ache in a way you no longer notice until you stand. The day has passed in the steady accumulation of parchment, ink, and identical phrases. 47 contracts documented. 47 fictions maintained. You gather your cloak. Outside Florence is blue with dusk. The guild halls are closing. The taverns are lighting their lamps. The city moves through its evening rhythm. The same rhythm as yesterday, which was the same as the day before. Marco extinguishes the last candle. The counting house goes dark. Tomorrow, the work will resume. The same contracts in different forms. The same legal fictions applied to new transactions. The same quiet maintenance of a system that functions because everyone involved has agreed not to call it what it is. You step into the narrow street. The cold is immediate and clean. Behind you, the counting house waits in darkness for morning, when the ledger will open again and the work will continue exactly as it always has. The account books rest on the shelf behind Ronaldo's desk, their spines aligned, their clasps sealed. Each one holds a year's worth of contracts, partnerships that are not partnerships, loans that are not loans, interest that is not interest. The leather is dark with age and handling. The weight of them, pressed together, is the weight of Florence's banking district made solid. You close the last ledger of the day. The clasp clicks into place. Ronaldo stands by the window. The shutters are open. The air coming through is cold enough to make the candles gutter, but he doesn't move to close them. He's looking towards Santa Maria Novella, where the bells have just finished ringing Compline. The sound has faded, but the silence it leaves behind feels deliberate, like the church is waiting to see what happens next. The Cardinal's agent will be back in the spring, he says. You don't answer immediately. The Cardinal's loan, the one documented in 17 separate contracts, each one a partnership distribution tied to wool shipments that will never actually move, sits in the account book you just sealed. It will stay there until someone with authority decides to look, or doesn't. He'll want the same structure, you say. Ronaldo turns from the window. His face is lit from one side by candlelight, the other half in shadow. he'll want a lower rate. This is not a negotiation, this is a statement of fact. The Cardinal's household has discovered what every long-term client eventually discovers: that the Al-Busy counting house will accept a lower return in exchange for volume, consistency, and institutional silence. The structure doesn't change, the numbers do. We'll draft it the same way, you say: partnership distributions, delivery schedules, risk-sharing clauses. And the actual rate? 7%, down from 9. Ronaldo nods once. He doesn't smile. He never does when discussing terms that push against the edges of what can be documented without attracting attention. 7% is low enough to seem generous, high enough to remain profitable, and structured in a way that makes the question of whether it constitutes usury a matter of interpretation rather than fact. The account books on the shelf say nothing. They will say nothing in the spring when the Cardinal's agent returns. They will say nothing if a papal auditor ever requests them. What they contain is a record of transactions that are, in every particular, compliant with the letter of canon law. The spirit of the law is a theological matter. Theology is not your trade. Ronaldo closes the shutters. The room becomes warmer immediately, the cold air cut off, the candles settling into steady flame. The counting house at night is a different place than it is during the day. The work continues, but the rhythm changes. No clients arrive after Vespers. No guild officials. No apprentices asking questions about clauses they don't yet understand. Just the two of you, and the account books, and the accumulated weight of 3 generations of contracts that have never been challenged because they have never been worth challenging. Marco asked me a question today, Ronaldo says. You wait. He wanted to know if we've ever structured a loan we couldn't defend. This is not the kind of question an apprentice asks in his first month. It's the kind of question that comes after he's reviewed enough contracts to see the pattern. After he's learned how the triple contract works, how the bill of exchange works, how the partnership distribution hides the interest payment without technically lying. What did you tell him, you ask? I told him the question assumes there's a difference between structuring and defending. Ronaldo picks up a quill, examines the tip, sets it down again. Every contract we write is defensible, that's why we write it. The candles burn lower. The wax pools at their base. Outside, Florence is settling into the cold weight of January night. The guild's closed, the market's empty, the river moving past the Ponte Vecchio in darkness. Inside, the counting house holds its secrets, with the patient silence of locked wood and sealed leather. You think about the Cardinal's loan, about the 17 contracts that will be written in the spring, each one a fragment of a larger structure that cannot be seen unless you know to look for it. About the account books that will record those contracts with perfect accuracy and perfect discretion. About the fact that none of it is technically forbidden. The line between what is permitted and what is not is a matter of language. You live in the space where language bends without breaking. Where the Church's prohibition on usury meets the commercial reality of Florence's banking trade, and discovers that the gap between them can be measured, documented, and made to pay a return. Ronaldo extinguishes 2 of the candles. The room darkens by half. What remains is enough light to see by, but not enough to work by. The day is over. The account books are sealed. The next transaction will come tomorrow, or the day after, or in the spring when the Cardinal's agent returns, with terms that have already been negotiated in every particular, except the one that matters. You stand, your hands are ink-stained, they always are. The counting house waits in partial darkness, the account books rest on their shelf. The contracts inside them say exactly what they need to say, and nothing more. The smell is candle wax and iron gall ink. It saturates the counting house the way incense saturates a church. Not oppressive, just present. The scent of a trade practiced in enclosed spaces where flame and parchment are the tools of the work. By the end of a long day you don't notice it anymore. But in the morning, when you first unlock the door, it hits you. This is what money at rest smells like. Father Benedetto's homily this morning was the same one he delivers every third Sunday, you know, because you've heard it 4 times now. The subject is intention. The structure is Augustinian. The act matters less than the soul's disposition toward the act. The application is left carefully unspecified. He never mentions usury by name, he never mentions banking. He mentions contracts once, in passing, as examples of promises made before God. Then he moves to the gospel reading, and stays there for the remainder of the hour. The Church of Santa Maria Novella is close enough to the banking district that half the congregation works in trades that require careful interpretation of canon law. Father Benedetto knows this. He has heard their confessions. He has administered their sacraments. He has buried their dead with full rites, and without questions about how the deceased earned the money that paid for the stone and the prayers. His position on usury is a pastoral one. If the contract can be defended, the soul can be shriven. You sit in the 3rd row, Rinaldo sits beside you. 2 rows ahead, Ser Ottavio kneels with his hands folded, his lips moving in silent prayer. Behind you, Marco shifts his weight, restless in the way young men are when required to sit still for an hour, while a priest discusses moral philosophy in metaphors. The homily ends, the Mass continues, the Eucharist is distributed. You take it with the rest of the congregation. The body of Christ, given for you, placed on your tongue by a priest who knows exactly what kind of contracts you draft, and has decided that knowledge is not his concern. Afterward, in the cold air outside the church, Rinaldo stops to speak with Father Benedetto. You wait a few paces away. The conversation is brief. Rinaldo nods. Father Benedetto nods. They do not shake hands. Then Rinaldo turns and walks toward the Mercato Vecchio. And you follow. He asked about the Cardinal's loan. Rinaldo says when you're out of earshot. You don't ask what Father Benedetto wanted to know. You ask what Rinaldo told him. That it's structured as a partnership. And that partnerships are permitted. This is true. It is also incomplete. The Cardinal's loan is a partnership in the same way that a bill of exchange is a currency conversion. Technically accurate, functionally something else entirely. But the technical accuracy is what matters when the question is whether a contract violates canon law. Father Benedetto knows this. He has known it for years. His homilies are consistent because his position is consistent. If the Florentine banking houses structure their credit instruments in ways that can withstand scrutiny, he will not provide the scrutiny. His role is to shepherd souls, not audit account books. The counting house is warm when you return. Someone, probably Marco, has lit the brazier and opened the shutters to let in the late morning light. The account books are still on the shelf where you left them. The quills are trimmed. The ink is fresh. You sit at your desk. The smell of wax and ink is stronger here, concentrated by proximity to the candles and the parchment. It's the smell of work about to begin, of contracts waiting to be drafted, of language that will be chosen with precision, because precision is the only thing standing between a profitable loan and an accusation of usury. Rinaldo sits at his own desk. He doesn't speak. There's nothing to say. Father Benedetto's question has been asked and answered. The Cardinal's loan will be structured the way it was always going to be structured. The homilies will continue to emphasize intention over mechanism. The congregation will continue to take communion without examining too closely whether their livelihoods are compatible with their salvation. The bells of Santa Maria Novella ring sext. The sound carries across the rooftops, through the open shutters, into the counting house where 2 men sit in silence, surrounded by the smell of money at rest. You reach for a quill. The first contract of the day is a wool merchant's financing agreement. It requires documentation of partnership terms, delivery schedules, and profit-sharing arrangements. It requires no mention of interest. Interest is not part of the vocabulary. The vocabulary is distribution, share, risk, partnership, temporal consideration. The words are chosen carefully, they always are. The candle burns. The wax pools. The ink dries on parchment that will be filed, sealed, and stored with all the others. A record of transactions that say exactly what they need to say, witnessed by a church that has decided not to look too closely, overseen by a priest whose homilies are models of discretion. Father Benedetto's position is consistent because it has to be. Florence's banking trade is too large, too profitable, and too deeply woven into the city's commercial life to be stopped by theological objection. What can be managed is the language. What can be preserved is the appearance of compliance. The rest is a matter of interpretation. And interpretation, it turns out, is a skill that priests and bankers share. By evening, you have written the word partnership 43 times. You have not written the word loan once. This is not an accident. The breath you take at the end of the day is the breath of a man who has survived another round of contradictions, not resolved them, not escaped them, survived them. There is a difference. The mental state required to maintain dual language, to think in terms of interest rates while writing partnership distributions, to calculate returns while documenting risk-sharing arrangements, to know that every contract you draft is both legally defensible and functionally a loan, is not natural. It is learned. It takes practice. It takes the steady accumulation of days where you write one thing and mean another, until the gap between them stops feeling like dishonesty and starts feeling like precision. You are not lying. You are translating. Canon law says one thing. Commercial reality says another. Your trade is finding the words that allow both to be true at the same time. The counting house is dark now, except for one candle. Rinaldo left an hour ago. Marco left before him. You stayed because there was one more contract to finish, a Venetian merchant's bill of exchange that needed countersignature before morning. It's done now. The ink is dry. The document is folded and sealed. You sit in the near darkness and breathe. The air smells like spent candles and old parchment. The stone floor is cold beneath your boots. Outside, Florence is silent except for the river, which moves past the Ponte Vecchio without stopping, without caring whether the contracts you write are loans or partnerships, whether the language you use is honest or clever, whether the Church's prohibition on usury is being honored or simply avoided through better documentation. The river does not care. It moves south toward the sea. It has been doing this longer than the Church has been prohibiting usury, longer than Florence has been financing trade through credit instruments disguised as something else. Your breath slows. You think about the Cardinal's loan, which is not a loan. You think about the 17 contracts that will document it, each one a fragment of a structure too large to see unless you know to look for it. You think about Father Benedetto's homily, which said everything that needed to be said without saying any of it directly. You think about the fact that you are good at this work. Not because you believe in it, not because you think it's theologically sound, but because you understand that the gap between what is written and what is meant is where trade happens, where credit flows, where Florence finances its wall trade and its banking houses and its entire commercial empire on the back of language that bends without breaking. The candle flame is steady now. No drafts, no movement. Just a single point of light in a room full of shadows and account books, and the accumulated weight of contracts that have never been challenged, because they were written too carefully to fail. You stand. Your knees are stiff from sitting, your hands are cramped from writing. Your breath is the breath of someone who has spent the day maintaining a distinction that exists only in language. Partnership versus loan. Distribution versus interest. Risk-sharing versus guaranteed return. Tomorrow there will be more contracts, more carefully chosen words, more translations between what canon law permits and what commercial necessity requires. Tonight you extinguish the candle. The counting house goes dark. The account books rest on their shelves. The contracts inside them say nothing that can be used against them. This is the work. This is what survival looks like when the rules forbid the thing you do for a living. You find the words that make it permissible anyway. You breathe. You lock the door. You walk home through streets that are empty except for the cold and the darkness and the distant sound of the river, which does not stop, which does not care, which will still be moving in the morning when you return and open the ledger and begin again. The last contract of the day sits on your desk in the hour when the counting house begins to empty. Ronaldo has already left. Marco sealed his ledger an hour ago and walked home through streets you can hear but not see. The sound of shutters closing, boots on stone, voices calling the hour. The brazier has burned down to coals that give heat but no light. You finish the entry. Partnership distribution, 300 florins. Delivery in 6 months. The ink dries before you set the quill down. The contract goes into the wooden case with the others. You close the clasp. The sound is small and final. The counting house is warm now in the way stone holds warmth after the fire has gone. Not active heat, just the memory of it stored in the walls and released slowly into air that no longer moves. Your hands are ink-stained. The parchment smells like beeswax and something older, the scent of documents that have been handled and filed and retrieved and handled again until the material itself carries the texture of the work. You stand. The floor is cold through your boots despite the warmth in the air. The candles have burned low enough that the wax pools at the base, and you pinch them out one by one with fingers that no longer feel the heat. Outside, a cart passes. The wheels strike an uneven stone, and the sound echoes once before fading. Somewhere a child laughs, the sound high and brief, before a door closes, and the silence returns. You touch the edge of the desk. The wood is smooth where your hand always rests, worn by repetition into a shallow depression your palm knows without looking. The grain runs north to south. You have traced it 1,000 times while thinking through clauses that must say one thing while meaning another. The air smells like tallow and cold stone and the particular mustiness of parchment kept in wooden cases that never fully dry. You breathe it in. Your chest rises and falls with the same rhythm it has held since you sat down this morning when the bells rang prime. The ledger stays open on the desk. Tomorrow it will be the first thing you see when you return. The numbers will still be there. The contracts will still require review. The work will begin again at the same hour it began today, and the day before and the day before that. You walk to the door. The counting house settles into darkness behind you. Not the darkness of absence, but the darkness of a space that knows it will be filled again when morning comes. The account books rest on their shelves. The abacus sits silent. The quill waits in its holder. Outside, the bells of Santa Maria Novella ring compline. The sound moves through the district, across rooftops, through shuttered windows, into rooms where other ledgers are closing, and other candles are being pinched out by other hands that smell like ink and wax. You walk home. The streets are narrow and the cold has settled into them fully now that the sun is gone. Somewhere a dog barks. Somewhere a shutter slams. Somewhere someone is counting coins in a room you will never see, conducting business you will never witness, using structures you helped build without ever knowing who would use them or for what. Florence continues. The river moves. The work waits. The contract you filed an hour ago will clear in 6 months. By then you will have drafted 200 more. The sound of the compline bells fades as you walk, but the rhythm stays. You pass Santa Maria Novella. The doors are closed. Inside, Father Benedetto is conducting the service. The last office of the day, the prayers said before sleep. You know the cadence without hearing the words. You have attended enough times to recognize the shape of it, the steady movement from psalm to canticle to blessing. The structure as reliable as a triple contract. The cold is sharper now. It finds the gaps in your cloak and settles there. You think about the sermon Father Benedetto will deliver on Sunday. He has been working on it for 3 weeks. You know this because he mentioned it in passing 2 days ago while reviewing a partnership agreement that distributed profits in a manner entirely consistent with canon law. He did not ask about the structure, you did not explain it, the conversation moved on. The bells finish. The silence after them is not empty. It is filled with the absence of sound, in a way that makes you aware of breathing, footsteps, the distant movement of the river that you cannot see but know is there because you have lived in Florence long enough to feel its presence, even when the darkness hides it. Your boots strike stone, the rhythm is steady. The work you finished an hour ago is already becoming memory. Not forgotten, just filed in the same mental space where yesterday's contracts rest alongside last week's ledger entries and last month's negotiations with the guildmasters who require credit structures they have decided not to examine too closely. A window above you shows candlelight. Someone is still awake. You do not know who. It does not matter. The light marks a boundary between the street and the interior spaces where other work continues. Other hands move across other parchment. Other structures take shape in the gap between what is written and what is meant. You turn the corner toward home. The cold follows. Tomorrow the counting house will open at the same hour it always opens. The ledger will wait. The bells will ring terce and sext and none and vespers and compline, marking hours that pass whether you count them or not. You reach your door. The key turns. The hinges move without sound. Inside, the hearth has gone cold. You do not relight it. The darkness is enough. The warmth can wait for morning. You sit in darkness that is not complete darkness, the kind where shapes exist but details do not. The table, the chair, the cold hearth. Objects you know by touch and position rather than sight. Your hands rest on the table surface and the wood is smooth under your palms, worn by years of use into something that no longer feels like individual grain. Just the idea of wood preserved in a texture your hands recognize without thought. You think about the contract you wrote this morning, not the details. Those have already blurred into the pattern of all the other contracts written this month. Just the sensation of writing it, the weight of the quill, the resistance of parchment that is new enough to require pressure, but old enough to accept ink without bleeding. The particular angle your hand takes when forming the phrase, partnership distribution, for the 48th time in 2 weeks. The memory is tactile, not visual. You do not see the words. You feel them. Outside, Florence is silent in the way cities are silent late at night. Not empty, just contained. Sounds exist behind shutters and doors, muffled into privacy. The river continues. You cannot hear it from here, but you know it is there the same way you know the account books are resting on their shelves in the counting house. And the abacus is sitting in its usual position, and Ronaldo's ledger is closed and clasped and waiting for morning. Your breathing slows, the cold air moves through the room without urgency. You think about the distinction between a loan and a partnership distribution. The distinction is language. The function is identical. The difference is which words you use, and in what order, and what those words permit you to do within a structure that forbids the thing you are doing, while allowing the method you are using to do it. The thought completes itself and dissolves. Your hands are still resting on the table, the wood is no longer cold. Your body heat has transferred to it in the time you have been sitting here, and now the surface feels neutral, neither warm nor cold, just present. Tomorrow you will write more contracts. The phrases will be the same. The structures will hold. The darkness is warm now, or you are cold enough that the distinction no longer registers. You stand. The chair scrapes stone. You move toward the bed, without lighting a candle because the room is small enough that you know where everything is, and the darkness is not an obstacle, just the condition in which you finish the day. The blanket is wool, heavy, It settles over you with the weight of something made to hold warmth rather than generate it. Outside, the bells do not ring. Compline is finished. The city sleeps. The river moves. The contracts wait in their wooden case for morning, when the seal will break, and the counting will begin again. The quill moves. The contract follows. The words arrive in the same order every time because the order is what makes them legal. You don't decide the phrasing anymore. Your hand completes the clause before your mind registers the content. Partnership distribution. Risk assumption. Delivery variance. The vocabulary doesn't change, because change would require explanation, and explanation would require justification, and justification is what you've spent 3 years learning to avoid. Marco's desk is empty. The candle there has burned down to nothing. You notice this without looking up. The warmth from the brazier reaches your left side, but not your right. The stone floor pulls cold through your boots. The counting house holds both temperatures at once, and your body has stopped deciding which one to register. Both. Neither. The distinction doesn't matter when the work continues regardless. Ronaldo's voice reaches you from the back room. Not words. Just the rhythm of someone dictating terms to a scribe. The sound has texture but no meaning. It joins the other sounds, pages turning, coins being stacked in the strongbox, the distant bells that mark vespers but might as well mark any hour because the work doesn't pause for the liturgy. The air holds the weight of old parchment. Dust settles without hurry. The angle of the light through the high window has shifted, but you cannot say when. Time moves, but the counting house does not acknowledge its passage. Only the work, only the clauses arranging themselves in their proper sequence. You finish the clause. You begin the next one. The contract in front of you is identical to the one you drafted this morning, which was identical to the one from yesterday, which will be identical to the one waiting tomorrow. The sameness is the point. The sameness is what allows the whole structure to function without anyone examining it too closely. The ink dries. You reach for the next sheet. The candle flame doesn't waver. Outside, Florence continues in whatever form Florence takes after dark. Footsteps, voices, the river moving through its channel. Inside, the counting house reduces to parchment and firelight, and the small precise movements of a trade that has no other name, except the one you give it. Your hand knows the next word before you do. You write it anyway. The brazier has burned down to coals. No flame, just the dull red glow beneath a layer of white ash. The heat it gives now is gentler than before, arriving without force, settling into the room like something that has always been there. You are still at your desk. The contracts are stacked to your right, edges aligned. The quill rests in its holder. Your hands are folded on the wood surface, and you do not remember placing them there. The counting house is empty now. Ronaldo left some time ago. You heard the door, or you think you did. The sound was soft enough that it might have been the wind, or the settling of old timber, or nothing at all. It doesn't matter. The room is quiet, and the quiet has substance. The stone walls hold the cold, but the air inside has stopped moving. Everything has found its place, the ledgers on their shelf, the strongbox in its corner, the ink bottles arranged by size. The world has reduced to these objects, and the dim light that lets you see them. Your breath is slow. You notice it the way you notice the coals. Something happening without effort, continuing because there is no reason for it to stop. In, out. The rhythm matches the faint creak of the beams overhead, or perhaps the beams have matched themselves to you. Either way they move together. The window shows nothing. No moon. No stars. Just the deep blue-black of a city that has turned inward for the night. Somewhere Florence sleeps. The market stalls are empty. The churches are dark. The river flows, but no one is there to see it. The whole world has folded itself away, and what remains is this: a room, a desk, the last warmth of a fire that asks nothing of you. You do not move. There is no need. The contracts are finished. The numbers are balanced. The day has completed itself, and you are still here, breathing in the ember light, part of the quiet, part of the stone, part of the slow dissolving of all the hours that brought you to this moment. The coals dim further, the red fades to gray, the warmth remains. The bells have stopped. Or perhaps they ring still, somewhere far beyond the walls, but the sound does not reach you here. The night has deepened past the hour when anyone listens. You are lying down now. The surface beneath you is firm, cool. A straw pallet, a wool blanket, the small rented room above the counting house, where apprentices sleep when the work runs late. You did not climb the stairs with intention. You simply found yourself here, the way water finds its level. The room is narrow. The ceiling beams are close enough to touch if you lifted your hand, but you do not lift your hand. It rests at your side, fingers loosely curled, part of the stillness that has settled over everything. Outside, the city breathes, not with sound, with presence. You feel it the way you feel your own pulse. Faint, steady, requiring no attention. Somewhere, a shutter latches. Somewhere, a dog shifts in sleep. Somewhere, the river continues its slow work, shaping the banks, carrying what it carries, indifferent and patient and endless. The darkness is complete. No candle, no moon through the shutters, just the soft black that comes when sight is no longer needed. You are not watching, you are not waiting, you are simply here, one breath among thousands, part of the great quiet that holds Florence through the hours before dawn. Your body has released its questions. The weight of the day, the contracts, the numbers, the careful dance of legitimacy and sin, has dissolved into the straw, into the wool, into the cool night air that seeps through the gaps in the wood. What remains is lighter, softer, a shape that breathes because breathing continues, nothing more. The whole world is sleeping, the bankers and the beggars, the priests and the merchants, the horses in their stables, and the cats on the rooftops. The Arno itself seems slower now, as though even water must rest. And you are part of this. Not separate, not watching from outside. You are one sleeper among all the others, held in the same darkness, breathing the same night. The room fades. The boundaries soften. There is no difference now between the air and your breath, between the stillness outside and the stillness within. You are dissolving into sleep. The body releases. The edges soften. What was you becomes part of the room, part of the night, part of the slow rhythm that asks nothing and gives everything. There is no Florence now, no counting house, no contracts waiting in the morning light. These things exist somewhere perhaps, but they do not exist here. Here there is only the faint rise and fall of breath, the quiet pulse that continues without thought, without effort, without end. The darkness is warm. It does not press, it does not hold, it simply is, and you are within it, dissolving, softening, becoming something lighter than memory, softer than thought. The weight of 3 years, the careful words, the balanced books, the endless dance between what is permitted and what is possible, all of it has fallen away. What remains is simpler, truer, a breath, and then another, and then another. There is no separation now between sleeping and waking, no boundary between the self and the quiet. You are the stillness, you are the dark, you are the slow, patient rhythm of a world at rest, turning through the hours, asking nothing, offering everything. The breath slows, the body sinks deeper. The room, the city, the whole weight of the waking world dissolves into something gentler, something kinder, something that holds you without conditions and lets you go without question. You are sleeping now, softly, completely, held in the arms of a darkness that knows your name and does not need to speak it. Only breath remains, only this. Only sleep.